Jeep hasn't built a good old-fashioned pickup truck in decades, but for off-road enthusiasts craving that niche variety of rig, a small company called American Expedition Vehicles offers this, the Brute Double Cab. Costing anywhere between $80,000 and $120,000, the Brute ain't cheap, but it doesn't get much more practical or American than this stretched-out, reimagined truck. How did company founder Dave Harriton go from sleeping in a barn and launching his business on a shoestring budget to scoring a Chrysler Design Excellence Award and becoming one of the foremost names in the aftermarket off-road world? A couple buddies and me caught up with Dave and spent a day off-roading to find out. Finished Jeeps are delivered straight from their final assembly plant in Toledo, Ohio, to AEV's headquarters in Michigan, where they're completely reworked by a small group of skilled craftsmen. Nearly all of the Brute Double Cab's components are made within 200 miles of Detroit, a remarkable feat in this age of epidemic outsourcing. This newest version follows the single-cab Brute model based on Jeep's old TJ chassis, and extends the four-door JK Wrangler by some 30 inches. But this is no aftermarket hack job. AEV is so focused on engineering that they collaborate with Jeep on parts that end up on Chrysler assembly lines. Dave Harriton explains how the Brute epitomizes the type of truck that's become known as an overland vehicle. What's the concept behind an overland vehicle exactly?
Sure. Well, quite simply, all an overland vehicle means is it's a vehicle that you're dependent on. So it's vehicle-dependent travel. So, you're too far out to walk out safely. You're not going to call somebody for help. The weather conditions are too extreme. And so that's what this whole concept of overlanding is that's becoming quite popular. The difference between rock crawling, you kind of rock crawling and you have Baja racing, well, this is a whole new thing. And so, the vehicle has to be incredibly durable and dependable. It has to be incredibly capable, because quite often you may just be doing dirt roads, but you may come up against something where you went somewhere and now you're coming back and the road's washed out. And so not only do you have to know the capabilities of your vehicle, but you have to know that the vehicle is capable of doing something before you get into too much trouble.
Powered by a 3.6-liter Pentastar V6 producing a modest 285 horsepower and 260 pound-feet of torque, the Brute can also be ordered with a fire-breathing Hemi V8, which adds $20,000 to the sticker price, or even a supercharged version for off-road speed freaks. But even with its base engine, the Brute delivers something you won't find outside of a Land Rover Defender 130 pickup truck, which you can't buy stateside anyway. A combination of on-road comfort, off-road capability, and cargo hauling, making this the four-wheeled equivalent of a mountain goat on steroids. Tell me nose to tail about unique details to this vehicle that are kind of unusual.
Starting at the front, we have our heavy-duty front bumper. It's all stamped steel, which is really unique in our industry. We're the only people that do it. And that affords us a very strong bumper, but also keeps it lightweight. The heavier you get these vehicles, the more durable they have to become by their very nature. So we try and keep everything light, but very strong. So the bumper has integrated fog lights. It's completely compatible with the airbag system. And it meets all the factory corrosion requirements. It's designed to protect the radiator at all costs. So, there's certain things that people don't really understand. They might think it's a pretty bumper, but really everything there is for a reason. Everything there is for function and it's for durability for wherever you're at in the world. The wheels are they're a beadlock wheel. What that allows you to do is run extremely low tire pressures, as low as 2 psi. In overlanding, you may adjust the tire pressure, up to 6-7 times a day, depending on different terrain. 12 psi for gravel, 10 psi for rocks, 2 psi for snow, back up to 20 for a short paved road or good gravel road section. So those wheels, they clamp the tire to the wheel, and they just allow you to not worry so much about blowing a bead off in the middle of nowhere.
The surprising thing about the Brute isn't just how comfortable it is while crawling over some seriously severe terrain, but how such a long vehicle with a relatively low center of gravity is capable of clearing extreme approach and departure angles without scraping. I was expecting more creaks and groans from having this big long body twisting. Tell me a little bit about the chassis structure. What kind of bracing is going on to keep this from being too flexible or not flexible enough.
When we lengthen the chassis, we don't only lengthen it, we actually reinforce it considerably. So there are some huge gussets that are, 4.5 feet long that keep the chassis from twisting and bending too much, or what we call beaming. That's always an issue. The longer the wheelbase, the more that's an issue. But the other reason you don't hear a lot of creaks and groans is just because the way the suspension is designed, using stock rubber bushings, and also the body and bed both being mounted on rubber bushings also, it kind of isolates a lot of that potential creaking and grinding.
Tell me about the suspension setup on this truck. Is the goal to feel everything, or is it to be isolated and comfortable?
Yeah, well, again, it's all about driver fatigue. So whether it's on the highway or off-road, we're trying to make it so you have adequate feel, so it's a fun vehicle to drive, corners properly, slight bit of understeer, an emergency situation. But then off-road, we're trying to make it so there's lots of wheel travel, and it has a disconnecting electric sway bar because it's a Rubicon. So you can get an amazing amount of wheel travel off-road and still get adequate performance on-road. The suspension is unique because we have the same guys who design the factory suspension helping us design our suspension. And we've really improved both in handling, load carrying capability, and safety. And those are kind of the important things for overlanding. With our original Brute, we went with an all steel bed. That's our specialty, is steel stamping. With this Brute, it was imperative to cut the weight. So what we did is we came up with a really unique injection molding process with a honeycomb composite material to make the bed. And so the bed is stronger than our previous steel bed, almost impossible to corrode, more dent resistant and stronger. And it's also 140 pounds lighter. And so that 140 pounds translates directly into more cargo capability. And the other interesting thing about this bed, unlike most pickups where the bed is actually mounted directly to the frame, this one has rubber isolators, just like the truck body. Mm-hmm. So on these, if you're doing miles and miles and miles of washboard road, it's just a lot easier on things.
A lot of people buy snorkels for the way they look, clearly. Yeah. But what's the real function of a snorkel?
The simple answer is it's for deep water crossings. And that's kind of a misconception, because where the snorkel is most utilized is for people out in the desert. It's for dust, keeping dust out of the motor. We actually sell a cyclonic pre-filter that goes on top that'll filter out almost all the dirt before it ever hits the filter. So you can actually go for years instead of days. If you're traveling if you're have a little convoy in the desert and you're not the first guy, your filter could be plugged in as little as 45 minutes. So it's really important to have that dust filtration. And of course works in the water, keeps the water from ingesting the motor and hydrolocking.
After a day of traversing trails and rock-strewn mountain paths, the Brute double cab proved its mettle with composure and effortless capability. Even with a humble V6, this bad boy made it clear that the guys at AEV can build a mean off-road rig. And while I may have missed the high-speed, Baja-style approach of a truck like the Ford Raptor, the Brute's overland abilities made it a refreshingly different way to take in the great outdoors on four wheels. In fact, this was the kind of experience that made me want to grab a couple buddies, load up that bed with provisions, and head off into the great unknown. After all, at the end of the day, there's something to be said for going as slow as possible, but as fast as necessary, making this kind of truck more about the journey than the destination. For Car and Driver, I'm Bassem Wassef.